Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to OpenGov TV. I've got the distinct pleasure of having Aravind Kurapati, who is the Senior Director for Sales Asia for SolarWinds. Now, we are talking about enhancing interoperability among public sector agencies. As we are all familiar, the Singapore's 5-year mandate is to move applications and readily available data up to the cloud. Now, that's an awesome policy, but what does that really mean in reality? Because as you know, we got to have everything available all the time. That's what the pandemic taught us. We cannot go down. So when government agencies, Arvind, are shifting and moving to the cloud, how do they make that migration smooth? Because literally this is saying you're changing the wheel, of a car that's running at 60 miles an hour.
Yep, Mohit, I think that's a great way to describe. First of all, thank you very much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be on this. And what you described is exactly a lot of our customers describe their day in a life. And they probably further say, hey, imagine if someone were to just come in and just try to make it interesting by waving their hands in front of our eyes every now and then. That's how our day in the life of IT operations feels. But great question. So look, I think it's very important to start with the objective and the roadmap, right? Because cloud migration is really a means to the end. Okay? And it's typically not a very quick journey. It can be a process. It's literally a journey. Okay? And like everything else, it starts with a lot of planning. Okay? And before you start anything, you got to think about there's a notion called let's rationalize the digital estate planning. Okay, so you got to look at what you have today, and you got to look at what am I going to modernize, what am I going to retire, what am I going to rehost, what am I going to re-architect, and things like that. And then you sort of prioritize from there. Okay, so it's so important to understand the current state of the union and the objective and the roadmap. So that's critical. So if you talk about how you can find a single source of truth in an organization or agency, hey, what is the current set of business services? What are the infrastructure and applications and components, and how are they all related to each other, right? And there's a notion called a CMDB, which is supposed to be the single source of truth. Now, when you're thinking about this migration and to the cloud, it's often the little things that trip you up. That's what we hear. Sometimes it's not the big things, the little things that trip you up. And that's where things like the visibility that we have been providing for 22 years for our customers tells you in a visual manner, well, how are the applications connected? How is the infrastructure connected? Even things like databases, what talks to each other? And if you were to move this from here to there, then don't be blindsided by this other thing that's talking to this database. So we provide a lot of visibility, which I think is important. So I cannot emphasize enough the need to plan and understand the state of the union.
Now that makes sense, because now that Singapore has been moving, it's not like it's just started. It's been doing this journey for quite a while. But you got to put it in context that they've got to make the accessibility of the data, right? They got to make sure it's interconnected. Okay, obviously secure goes without saying in this day and age, right? Of the information. Where should they be? How do they do that?
Again, great question, right? So a few years ago, if you think about the same question, most people would have said choosing the cloud provider is the toughest decision. Okay? It may not be that big of a decision nowadays, but it's still a very important part of the decision. Okay? Specifically, if you think about the Singapore government context, the great news is that a lot of the due diligence is done. Right? I think everyone is aware of the government commercial cloud and the initiatives, the timelines, the governance framework around it, all those things. So there's actually a lot of the foundation has been laid, which gives a very, very good starting point, right? And if you think about how that might be benefit, and how you think about the accessibility and the security and all those things that you mentioned, again, there's not a new term like zero trust is an important part of it, right? And zero trust is a framework. It's not a product. It's not one vendor that provides zero trust. And a big part of this is the identity and the governance aspects of it. And we may not realize the importance of that, but even everyday things that we do, and if I want to open an account with a financial institution, I can leverage my info and just punch in my sync pass and I can approve sharing that information, right? It's so seamless. So it's that identity aspect and is so critical in all of this. So it's a pretty broad and complex project scope, I would say, Mohit.
Yeah.
But the good news is the foundation is there. There are existing frameworks that we can easily refer to.
No, spot on, because as government agencies, the way we are seeing improve, okay, the sharing of citizen data across various agency department services, they've got how do they go about doing that? Because data is sensitive, right? Everybody who owns data of a citizen is accountable and liable. But how do they go about sharing it?
So I would go back to what's the objective and the use case, right? So what are we going to do with all this different disparate citizen data that might need to be looked at it holistically, right? How do you correlate? How do you make sense out of that? So it's probably a lot of the basics, right? So what is the purpose of this data? Who needs access to the data? What do we need to do with this data? Okay? And what's the desired outcome? Okay? So typically this ends up being, from what we hear, a very typical big data and data analytics use case. But once the objectives are clear, there's a lot of interesting things that we can do. Right? Again, there could be things like massive big data databases, like I mentioned, right? And then we do have solutions like our database performance analysis solutions, where it's so critical that these things are all responding at scale and at fast and down to the second. So you got to be able to quickly isolate what's the issue, how do I get to it, so that the services move on, right? But yeah, look, I think it's fantastic. All these things that we are seeing around us is very, very fascinating.
You are right, absolutely, and I agree with that, because Singapore government is keeping the citizen in the center of its universe, and hence it's making sure that all the access it has is real time. So can you give me examples of where SolarWinds personally monitors services or other products or tools to help government in sharing citizen data securely? Because I think that's what we're talking about, right? In the environment between ministries, yeah.
Yep. And we have been visibility partners for government agencies and across the world, right? But if I may just maybe expand the scope of that question a little bit, Mohit, and not just sharing of citizen services, but broader data sharing in general. We've been in the business of providing end-to-end visibility of how applications and infrastructure and all the complexities that come around that. Okay? So in general, we have the broadest and deepest sort of capabilities that collect tons of information on how this is all performing and how it's all interacting. Okay? So in general, I would say, without going to specific solutions, where we come in is helping organizations understand what's the baseline, what changed, how do you correlate all of that, and how do you detect anomalies and make intelligent decisions around that, right? So that's the general scope of where we come in and help governments across the world.
No, thank you. So let me take that a little bit deeper. Right now that the public sector can leverage citizen data, right, in multiple ways, how can they unlock further opportunities and better serve citizens?
I love the word serve, Mohit, because one of our mission statement that we laid out at the beginning of last year is we are in the business of enriching the communities that we serve. That's our mission. Right? Everybody across the world is committed to that mission. Okay? And that enrichment could mean different things to different people. For a lot of them, it's getting their weekends back because we automate so many things for them. Okay? So in that sense, I love the word serve that you used. but it's a combination of using technology, data, and other things to deliver that enrichment. Okay? We live in a digital world, right? So we are leaving our digital footprint every day, some of it voluntarily, some of it maybe not so voluntarily, right? But there is massive amount of digital data. There is a fantastic ecosystem, which in Singapore, there are many government-sponsored programs, whether you want to stay fit or to upskill yourself. There's so many things. Yeah. And the challenge of making sense of all of this data until now has been, can you put enough compute power behind it to process all this information? Okay. That's no longer an issue. How do you automatically make sense out of all of this data? And that's where AI and machine learning comes into place. And those algorithms are getting smarter and smarter. So the opportunity that lies ahead of us, especially in Singapore, where we are so digital, is unbelievable. It's amazing, right? Imagine if it could be intelligently prompted to go join ActiveSG, right? Based on how much I exercise or not, right? Or imagine if you could be smarter about providing financial planning to people, especially younger generation people. So there's massive, massive opportunity. And I think the technologies are there, the data sets are there, the capabilities are there. Um, yeah, it's just mind boggling what's
It is.
possible.
You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. But with all this migration to cloud using the new tech, skills is always the biggest challenge that we're facing right now, right? So how does government go about upskilling its workforce to ensure that it's ready for tomorrow?
Again, so this one in particular, change is never easy, right? Change is never easy. But equally, blending the experience and the knowledge of people who know those services and how they've been doing it extremely valuable. Okay? Maybe I'll just share an example, which is not quite in the government context, but it's a very interesting case study of how a brick and mortar hardware chain in Australia, they were late to the game in digital transformation, but one of the fundamental ingredients to their success was not only leveraging the new technology, coders and smart programmers and cloud and all those things, but blending in the experience of people who have been with them for many, many years to know how good customer experience looks like. Okay? So there is upskilling of talent that needs to happen because there are new ways to interact, new ways to deliver services, new technologies to consume. Okay? But at the fundamental objectives really don't change, right? What we are trying to accomplish is the same. So it's really, I think it's a combination of upskilling people on the technology and the interfaces and how to handle data and those sort of things, but also equally employ that experience as part of the planning and the transformation process.
No, thanks. So my last question, SolarWinds, what's this, what separates you from the rest? Why should people be looking at you guys?
Okay. And this is a very passionate answer, Mohit. So, because I've been with the company for 12 years. Okay,
nice.
So, and I've seen the evolution and transformation of SolarWinds, and we've been in this business of providing visibility for over 22 years. Okay? And we have the broadest and deepest set of capabilities that provides insights to customers for multi-cloud environments, which is a typical hybrid nature of most organizations, including governments. Okay? So where we come in and is, like I said, enriching the lives of the communities, and it could be that for the site reliability engineer, how do you quickly troubleshoot? For a network engineer, how do I automate? Right? For a database administrator, how do I quickly get to the root cause and make sure that that month-end report runs fine, right? So it's all of those things. It's such a broad and deep set of technologies, and it's all built over time with tons of customer feedback, right? So we've always been very connected to our customers. Our community is called TWAC, and it's one of the most active tech communities in the world. So we listen to our customers, and a lot of this has been built over 22 years, and we are continuing to transform. Right. So that's what sets us apart.
Yeah. No, Aravind, I thank you for that, and thank you for your time. Okay, ladies and
Thank you,
gentlemen.
Mohit.
Okay, absolutely. Just see you soon. Take care.